Okay, time for yin yoga. We'll start today with some back bends. So we'll start with a gentle one and then just kind of work our way up. Uh, the first one we'll do is melting heart pose. And one thing I'll tell you, so you'll come to hands and knees. If you're on a hard surface like me, it might be nice to fold the back of the mat in if you're using one to give your knees a little extra padding. Even if you don't have anything going on the knees, I still do it because it feels good. If you're on carpet, it's probably excessive and you don't need it. So just work with the surface that you have. So coming to hands and knees, maybe you have extra padding underneath the knees. Bring the forearms down to the mat. Line up the hips so they're over the knees, so the thighs are vertical. The hips will want to go forward as we go deeper into this pose, and your job is to keep them right where they are. So hug the belly in a tiny bit so you feel some support across the lower back, and then start to walk the elbows forward. You don't need to go very far at all, maybe just a few inches. Bring the forehead down to the mat and then rest. So now you can just let the body be heavy. You're going for a gentle back bend. So you're nowhere near 100% into the shape. And if for whatever reason melting heart pose doesn't work for you, you can always come down lying on your stomach and take Sphinx pose. Similar shape, definitely a back bend. But if this one works, stay here. Start to take a deep breath in through the nose. Back out through the mouth, soft. Two more like that. Deep breath in. Exhale as long as you can out through the mouth. Inhale in through the nose. One more time, back out through the mouth. This time in through the nose. Back out through the nose. Keep going with this breath. Feeling the opening that's starting to happen in the upper body, shoulders, chest, upper back. Letting the breath work through the body. And being still otherwise. You'll start to lift the head up, coming back up to hands and knees, tabletop. And then we'll do cat cow, but really light. So just go like a third of the way into each one. So on the inhale, bring the heart forward. You can lift the tail just a third of the way. And on the exhale, third of the way around the spine. So it might not even look like you're doing it. Maybe the chin comes toward the chest, but not all the way. So just a third of the way, cat cow going forward and back. We want some movement in the spine to counter what we just did, but we're coming into another back bend. So we don't want to totally remove the opening that we just created in the body. So subtle cat-cow. Try not to take it too much bigger than where you are. Coming back to that neutral spine. You're already on the knees. You'll stay on the knees. Just walk the hands back, come up to kneeling. So head right over the hips, hands come to the hips. So knees are hip width distance apart. So that means the knees aren't touching. You don't want them any wider than that. Toes can be tucked or untucked. It's really a matter of whichever one feels better for you. I like tucked. Hands come to the lower back. So you want the fingertips to point down, hugging those outer elbows in. And once you hug the outer elbows in, you'll feel the spreading across the chest. As you root down through the legs, start to hug the belly in, lift the chest up, keep the head right over the hips. Keep the hips right over the knees. You can bring the chest back if you want to, but you're not going as deep as you possibly can. Look forward. That helps keep the pose a little bit more gentle instead of looking up. And then you're still with that ujjayi breath in and out through the nose, up and down the back of the throat. So lower body is strong. It's giving you that support you need to work with the upper body, maybe playing with bringing the chest back. And it might not feel like you're back at all. That's fine. This pose definitely is a bigger one, camel pose. Probably one of the bigger poses in yin because it does bring so much energy into the body. All right, come back up to the head over the knees and then untuck the toes, sit back onto the heels. If that's comfortable for you, if the knees don't like it, you can sit up on a block or just come back to tabletop. Hands and knees. So hands can rest on the thighs, close the eyes, take a couple of breaths here. We'll do 2 more rounds of what we just did. You can stay as gentle as you want with this because it's such a big pose. If you feel like you're finding an opening and want to go deeper, that's fine. Just try not to go all the way in. So let's come back up to the knees, standing on the knees, either toes untucked or tucked, knees hip width distance apart, hands to the lower back. Hug those outer elbows in, lengthen the thighs down toward the mat, hug the belly in, stay looking forward. Maybe the head goes back, maybe the chest goes back. Stay looking forward as long as you can. The hands help you keep the hips over the knees. And then as you hug the outer elbows in, that's where you feel that width across the chest, across the collarbones, shoulders away from the ears. Sometimes they want to hike up, but keep those in place. That's part of your support too in this shape. Then you focus on the breath in and out through the nose, up and down the back of the throat as best we can. Slowly come all the way back up to where you were, untuck the toes, sit back onto the heels, rest. So we're not counterposing. We're trying to keep the back bend building with each time we come into it. Feeling any sensations in the body that are happening, taking that in. Okay, last time with this one. So come back up onto the knees, knees hip width distance apart, up to you if you tuck the toes, hands to the lower back, lengthen the tail down, lift and spread the chest. See where the shape is now. Try not to go all the way in. Stay looking forward. And that helps keep the back of the neck long too. And start to bring yourself back up. Once you come back up, bring the hands to the mat. So you're coming back to hands and knees. If you folded the mat, doubling it up in the back, lengthen it back out to its regular length, unfolding it. We'll all come to hands and knees. Bring the knees and the feet all the way together. Tops of the feet are on the mat. Sit the hips back, coming into a child's pose with the knees and feet together. Arms reach out in front of you, head comes down to the mat. And if you need to keep the hips up high, that's fine. Do that, especially if the knees need more space. So you're feeling a slight rounding of the upper back. And what's nice about keeping the knees together and the feet together is the thighs completely support the lower back. So there's no belly falling between the thighs with the legs the way that they are. And that helps us find a spreading sensation in the lower back. With the arms out in front of you, you're still getting an upper body opening. And you'll let the hips be wherever they naturally want to go. So you're not trying to force the hips down toward the heels, just see where they end up. Take a deep breath in through the nose, back out through the nose. Start to lift the head back up, come back up to hands and knees. You'll just bring the feet over to one side, finding a seat. So legs out in front of you, maybe scoot forward if you ended up toward the back of the mat. And let's come on to the left hip. So you'll lie down on your side. You'll use the left hand to keep the head propped up. Legs are just straight out behind you. And this right hand is down in front of you for support. So you're lying on your side, left hand supporting the head, keeping it up. And you'll take this right leg and you'll bring it forward. So it could be down by the other foot. You just don't want to go higher than the hip. So if it feels comfortable and easy to keep the right foot in line with the right hip, do it. Some of you might feel a big opening on the outer edge of that right leg. And if it's too intense, then just walk the foot back. So find where you're comfortable. We're doing cat pulling its tail again. We did this last week and I got a lot of great feedback on it. So I thought we'd do it again this week. So legs are all set up. Now you want to bend this bottom leg. So that left foot comes in toward the glute. And just let it go wherever it wants to go. You're not using the hand. See how that shape feels. So you're in it. If you want to stay here, stay here. Another option, every option gets a little bit deeper. You could take this right hand, bring it back behind you, and see if you can grab the foot. So sometimes that's a little bit more accessible than others, depending on what you have happening today. So just respond to it. If you can't reach the foot, then you skip that part. Bring the right hand back down on the mat in front of you. You could just keep the bend in that bottom leg happening wherever it happens. So maybe you stay right here. If you want to go further, you can bring this left arm out in front of you and then come onto the back a little bit. So that left shoulder will be on the mat Head will be on the mat. Right shoulder's probably lifted for all of us, quite a bit. And now you're in more of a twist with the shape, which is what we're looking for to counter the back bend. You could stay looking up. You could look over the right shoulder if the neck's okay with that. And you don't need to go very far. Maybe you just tilt the nose over to the right a little bit. And if you do have the foot and it becomes too much to hang on to it, let it go at any time. Back out of the pose whenever you want to make it gentler. Especially with these longer holds, since the intensity builds. So that's why we do the longer holds and less effort. And while this pose can feel kind of pretzely, it is getting into a lot of different areas in the body. Maybe that outer right leg, maybe that left quad, maybe that right shoulder if you're grabbing the foot. And then that twist up the spine, maybe up through the neck. You'll start to bring the head back to center. If the head's down on the mat, gently release that left foot, extending the leg back in front of you. Bring the right arm over to the left, and then use the right hand to lift the head and the chest up, hand down on the mat, head in the left hand. And then right leg comes back to stack on top of the left leg. So we'll switch sides. You'll come onto the right hip. I'm just going to flip over this way so I can stay facing the screen. You could turn the other direction if that feels better. Choose a setup that's working in your home. So coming onto the side of the right hip, you'll bring the right hand to support the head, legs back out, lengthened behind you. And now you'll bring that left foot forward and just feel your way into it. It's a different leg. It might be a different story. Maybe the foot's in line with the hip. Maybe it's lower than the hip. See where you need it to be. Be gentle with that IT band, outer edge of this left leg if it's talking to you and it feels tight. All right, bend the right knee. See where the foot ends up. You don't have to use the hands, just see where it goes. It's not as high as you can get it. Just start there. Then maybe we take this left hand back behind us and see if the foot and the hand connect. And then we stay here. So we're not rushing through the shape to get into it. We're just assessing every time we make a change, seeing how the body is receiving that change. If you'd like to take it further, you can reach that right arm forward, coming onto your back, head down on the mat, opening up across the chest. seeing if this is working. And if it is, stay here. If it's not, start to back your way out. Maybe you let go of the foot and you keep the twist. Maybe you come back up onto your side and supporting the head in the right hand. Or maybe that left leg needs to go a little lower. You could start to turn the head over to the left. See how the neck feels when you do that. You don't need to go all the way over, just part of the way. Eyes can close. Once you find a place in the shape where you can be still, start to focus on the breath. To help the pose move throughout the body. Well, and this is also a great pose for the lower back, lumbar part of the spine, sacral area. I forgot to mention that before. You'll start to bring the head back to center, gently release that right foot, extending the leg back down. Left hand comes over to the right side. Then use the right hand to lift the head up, propping the head up in the hand. And left foot comes back. So it's right on top of the right foot. And then you'll come forward onto your stomach. So just roll forward onto your stomach and rest the head on the hands. So stack one hand on top of the other, rest the forehead down, close the eyes. Still in a light back bend here, but also just getting you on your stomach before we transition. Side of the mat, bringing the legs wide, toes pointing up. You could prop the hips up on something. It's actually really nice in this shape. I like doing a folded blanket. You could do a bolster. If the hips are really tight, you can bring yourself up on a block. So if that's an option for you, grab something, put it underneath the hips. You don't have to do it. You can still do the shape without it. You're not going for your widest leg straddle. So make sure you keep that part gentle. If you're on a hard surface, it's nice to keep the heels on the mat. So grab blocks if you have them, put them outside of the right leg, one on each side, and knees and toes will stay up. You'll just start to fold forward over the right leg. You're not going to go very far. Close the eyes. You can feel a rounding of the spine. I like to use the blocks either as armrests or just a place to rest the hands, but the hands need to touch down on something. So don't just keep reaching. Let the head and the neck go. Close the eyes. Go part of the way in. And if it becomes too intense at any point, you can bring the legs closer together or lift the chest up a little bit higher. And if you're using props, especially blocks underneath the hands or the forearms, if you feel like you want to go deeper and they're not allowing that to happen, you can always change the height of the blocks. Just try not to go more than 3/4 of the way in to the shape. And start to make your way back up. If you have blocks by the right leg, just bring the blocks back behind you. And we'll transition with a counter pose first. So bring the hands back behind you, walk the feet in, keep the feet wide, and bring the knees side to side like windshield wipers. And you'll start to come back to that wide-legged straddle. So not as wide as you can go. We'll even things out and go to the left leg. So you'll bring the blocks outside the left leg. If you have blocks, otherwise skip it. You don't have to use it. Start to fold forward over that leg, letting the head and the neck go. Same thing, just the other side. Go gentle. This one takes a while to get into. So just get the direction going or the momentum going in this direction, and the rest will kind of just work itself out. Find some sense of relaxation at the same time. If you can easily breathe in and out through the nose, up and down the back of the throat, and keep that concentration, you're probably in the right spot. If you can't do that, that typically means you've gone way too far into the shape. Making any necessary adjustments as the body becomes more familiar with the shape on this side. Lower, higher. And let's start to make our way back up to seated. Set the blocks off to the side so they're out of the way. Grab onto the backs of the thighs to bring the soles of the feet to the mat. And if you have something underneath the hips, set that off to the side. Just lift the bum up, set it off to the side, hands back behind you, and you'll move the knees side to side, coming back into your windshield wipers. Do this a few times. We'll actually use this as a transition into our next pose. So next time both knees end up over on the left, stay there and work the knees down toward the mat. They don't have to touch, especially that right knee is probably going to be lifted, but you're already feeling a stretch here. So this right hand, bring it forward between the legs, setting up for deer pose. So chest points forward. You could be leaning way over to the left. That's fine. You want to just keep it soft. And if you're, make sure you're on your mat too, if you're off. Feet coming in toward the body is gentler. Feet going out, getting that 90-degree angle on both legs is the deepest variation. So you can play with starting to bring the chest upright. Don't feel like it has to go as far up as you can go, but you want to feel like that right hip is going down toward the mat, especially the right inner knee, inner thigh, and the outer left knee is pressing down toward the mat at the same time. So belly hugs in, chest lifts. You could still be sitting to the side. That's fine. Stay here, or you could start to walk the hands forward. Just make sure that you don't go so far forward that you lose all the work in the right hip and inner thigh. Blocks can be used underneath the hands, arms, forearms. You could build something for the head and rest the head on there. So a little bit of effort on that inner right knee going down toward the mat. Once you start leaning forward, if you chose that option, it's easier to get that outer left knee down toward the mat. And as you lean forward, if it becomes too intense, bring the feet closer into the body. So you're playing with rotating the hips in opposite directions with this so that left hip is externally rotating and the right hip is internally rotating. And we do this a lot in yoga with the hips and the shoulders. Open them in opposite directions at the same time. Last couple deep breaths where you are. We'll start to lift the head up, come back up onto the hands. If you're using blocks, set them off to the side. Bringing the chest up, you'll take this right hand back behind you, come back to seated with the toes turned out and the knees wide, windshield wipers side to side. See if you can bring the knees this time all the way over to the right. And if your blocks are over on the other side, this is probably a good opportunity to move them so they're available. Hands are back behind you. You're just working the knees down toward the mat, feeling that hip opening, maybe a little bit more on the left side than the right. Maybe you take this left hand forward between the legs. See how that shape works as you turn the chest forward. Remember, you can always bring the feet in if it's too intense, or keep them out in that 90-90 degree shape. Maybe you're leaning over to the right. That's fine. Or maybe you can start to bring the chest upright. Just be gentle with yourself. Inner left knee is pressing down, outer right knee is pressing down at the same time. Starting to come into deer pose. You're already in it with the chest up. If you want to lean forward, you can. Just try not to come so far forward that you lose this work in the left hip. So take your time. Also, you might be in a different spot on this side. So we're always different side to side. Make sure you're not forcing yourself right into the same exact position you were in on the first side. It could look totally different. That's okay. You're just trying to find a similar sensation on each side, wherever that happens, being okay with it. And that's part of what's great about yin is we're not moving a lot. We're setting up the pose and then we stay still. We just let the breath move. Getting used to the comfort of our own company. Finding a pleasant silence. Two more long, deep breaths. Start to lift the head back up, walking the hands in, setting the blocks off to the side. Bringing that left hand back behind you, back to windshield wipers, knees side to side, still leaning back on the hands, chest reclined. Feeling the difference. Now we've done both sides, so maybe it's a little easier to get the knees closer to the mat as you go side to side because we spent so much time in deer pose. And then you'll bring the knees back to center, turning to face forward on your mat, legs out in front of you. Have blocks nearby. Even here, you can prop yourself up on a blanket if you want to, or have some kind of cushion underneath the hips. If you're fine with your seat on the mat, then stay there. So we'll do a forward fold with the legs out in front of us. We've had the legs bent for quite a while. Let's just do a forward fold with the legs straight. So just start to round forward. So there's a rounding of the spine. Let the hands slide forward on the legs. Close the eyes. Fold forward, and then decide how you want to use the blocks. If you're using blocks, you can stay right here if this is comfortable. You can use the blocks underneath the forearms, the hands, or you could put a block between the calves and maybe the other block to rest the head down onto the block. Palms can face up if you take that option. Allow yourself to be heavy without reaching. And that's what the props are great for, is you can kind of just sink into them. You don't feel like you're holding the shape so much, but letting go into it, that sense of surrender. Maybe feeling the length build on the back side of the body at this point in the pose. You'll start to lift the head back up, coming back up to seated. Set the blocks off to the side if you're using them. And then we'll come into another hip opening. We'll kind of tie everything together now that we're open. So come to a cross-legged seat. Doesn't matter which shin's in front. Go for whichever one happens first. That's probably the easier side. So crossing at mid-shin or somewhere around there. It doesn't have to be the tightest version of square. So once you're here, use the hands to lift the hips up and just set them back down again. That gets your spine in alignment. So try it this way, and I'll give you another option if this doesn't work. Start to walk the hands back. And as you start to walk the hands back, if you can get the glutes to go forward, so they're going toward the top of the mat, try that. And then see if you can come down onto the forearms. You're keeping the crossing of the legs. The knees can always go wider if you need more space there. And then if you can come all the way down onto your back, try that. And you'll feel that length on the thighs, the hips. It can be a deeper pose. You just want to make sure the glutes are going forward toward the feet, not up toward the shoulders, so that you keep the lower back long. You can always widen the feet if you need to make it a little gentler. You know you're going to be here for a little bit. And then clasp opposite elbows overhead if this is all working. If for some reason this is not working, you can't get the back down, come back up to seated, keep the legs, and just fold forward over the legs. So doing square pose, going forward instead of reclined on our backs in a supine position. Close the eyes wherever you are. Start to settle into the pose. Two more breaths where you are, long, deep ones. If you're on your back, you should be able to just switch the crossing of the legs. So bring the other shin in front, come back to that cross leg. Glutes are probably right where they need to be. And then you can switch the clasp of the elbows. So bring the other forearm on top. If you're seated, folded forward, come back up to seated, switch the crossing of the legs, and come back forward. So just switching the crossing of the legs and the arms if you're on your back. You'll start to come back to lying on your back. So if you're seated forward, come back out of the shape, come onto your back. If you're on your back, bring the soles of the feet to the mat, arms down by the sides. You can turn the palms to face up. Hands aren't touching the body, so bring them out a little bit, maybe a little bit wider than the shoulders. Start to extend the legs out in front of you. Let the toes turn out, feet flop open, and you're right into Shavasana. So you're staying on your back, closing the eyes, feeling that length in the legs, the opening in the hips, maybe even the top of the pelvis. If you need to lift the chest up to get the shoulder blades underneath you, take a moment to do that. And coming into your final relaxation pose, feeling the sensations of your practice. Maybe feeling more at home in your body. You'll start to wiggle the fingers and the toes, finding small movements. Reach the arms overhead, taking a big long stretch on your mat, feeling all that space you made. Walk the feet in, bending the knees. Rolling over onto your right side, cradle the head on the arm, keep the eyes closed, just lying in a fetal position for a moment, coming off of your back, spending some time here, lengthening the transition. Using the left hand, press yourself up to a comfortable seat, whatever your meditation seat looks like. Sitting up tall, resting the hands on the knees so you can bring the shoulders away from the ears, rise up through the crown of the head, point the tip of the nose forward and down a little bit. Now bring the hands together in front of you, keeping that lift of the chest. Start to bow the head. Take a moment, honor and acknowledge your heart and your spirit, as well as everyone around you. Bring the head back up, blink open the eyes. Namaste. Thank you for sharing your practice. Hope you feel good that you took care of yourself today. I'll see you next time.